I hijacked an episode of my daughter's podcast called the Profitable Private Practice Podcast. So my daughter is Cheta. She's 17 years old. And for the last few months, she has been interviewing doctors in the EntreMD Business School and who are in private practice and finding out their secrets. And she tracks their journeys from the beginning. So today you're going to listen to Dr. Karen Kaufman, who takes us all the way back to when she was working as a naval physician and when she went into what we would call traditional private practice. So when she started her own private practice and how she grew it and how she got to multiple seven figures in less than 5 years and all of that. And so I want you to really lean back and enjoy this episode. And when you're done, I want you to subscribe to this channel if you haven't already. And I also want you to support my daughter by subscribing to the Profitable Private Practice podcast. Okay? All right. So lean all in. Here's the episode.
Hello, everybody. And welcome to the Profitable Private Practice, where I interview doctors that are thriving, where the common narrative is that private practice is dead, which it's not. And so today we are here with Dr. Karen Kaufman, and we're going to go ahead and interview her today. Hi, Dr. Karen.
Hi, Cheta. Thank you so much for the opportunity to talk with you today. I'm super excited to get through all of your questions and to tell you a little bit about my practice.
So why don't you go ahead and give us a 60-second introduction of yourself?
So hello, everyone. My name is Karen Kaufman, and I am an allergist immunologist in private practice. And I help children and adults with allergies, asthma, and recurrent infections to feel better on less medicine and improve their quality of life. My practice, Kaufman Allergy, Asthma, and Immunology, was opened almost 5 years ago, so January of 2021, and we are located in Vienna, Virginia. And since we opened, we have had a lot of growth. Our group includes not only myself, but some other physicians, nurse practitioner, and we employ about 15 people in the practice. And it is not only the best place, in my opinion, for our patients to receive care, but it's also the best place for people to work. And we have a wonderful company culture. And I think that's just a few of the things that makes our practice just really special.
I was doing a little bit of digging before our interview, and I found out that you were in the Navy. How cool is that? I think my mother wanted to go to the Navy at some point, but it was only for the uniform. It wasn't to actually do anything over there. And so what was, the most exciting thing about being in the Navy?
I spent 10 years in the Navy, and that included my time in my internship and residency, which I did in internal medicine. And after I finished training, I worked as an internist, and I was on the teaching faculty in a family medicine residency program in Pensacola, Florida. And then I went on to do my fellowship, which was out of service, but I was still on active duty at the time. And then finished my last 3 years practicing allergy and clinical immunology in another teaching institution where we had internal medicine and pediatrics residents that we were training, as we were seeing patients at that time. I really loved my time in the military. And one of the reasons that I decided to join in the first place was because I was trying to find out how to get school paid for. I had a 3-year scholarship, which was called a Health Profession Scholarship Program. And that really allowed me the opportunity to get through med school with really minimal student loans and to begin to serve at that time. And when I joined the military, when I decided to get commissioned, was actually right after 9/11, a time where I think patriotism was really at an all-time high, I think, in our generation, where people just felt that feeling of wanting to do something greater for our country. And that was something that I felt very deeply at the time. But one of the things that I think was most unique about my time in the military was my time deployed in 2009 on the USNS Comfort, which is one of the Navy's 2 hospital ships as part of the Continuing Promise mission. So I was able to, go around to all sorts of places in the Caribbean and Central America and South America to provide humanitarian medical support, along with, extending sort of that political handshake of goodwill and meeting people from all over the world. So that was just a really enriching experience for me. And then in addition to that, I loved my time in medical education. I think I love to be a teacher. And now in private practice, I think I kind of take that same approach when I see patients. And the way I deliver patient care involves a lot of teaching as well, because I just think that enriches the experience in medicine.
That's really amazing. I don't think I've ever met I have met, like, veterans before, but not from the Navy side. It's always, like, air or elsewhere. So that's really cool that you're able to do that and then also apply that to, where your practice is. And then so let's dive in, a little bit deeper. So could you walk me through the moment you first entertained the thought of becoming an entrepreneur?
The first time it ever even occurred to me was actually when I was a fellow. And my fellowship, again, was during my active duty service time. And I knew I still had 3 more years of kind of obligated service time to continue after completion of fellowship. But it was when I was a fellow that it even occurred to me that, that allergist immunologists might be in a private practice where, where it was a solo physician owned practice that didn't, it truly wasn't on my radar. I think I've said this before, but, in my mind, I think about there's this old movie long before your time called Doc Hollywood with Michael J. Fox, where he was this doctor who moved to the country and he just became this like country doctor that went to people's houses and like, he bartered its services for a pig and all of this stuff. And like, that was really in my mind of that's what that looks like. Like people, people nowadays don't do that, or people who live maybe in more of a suburban or even an urban setting, like they wouldn't do that. And when I was a junior fellow, the senior fellow who was a year ahead of me, her plan was to finish fellowship and open her own practice. And that was really very eye-opening to me. So as she was starting to make plans for her practice, she and I did a lot of kind of groupthink and brainstorming and what could that look like and how would somebody be able to do that. And I think that was really the groundwork that for me, I thought, well, when I get out of the military, this is what I want to do too. I was approaching like my last maybe a year and a half, 2 years in the military. And I started to think I need to make my plans for, what's next. I kind of thought about it and looked around in some, towns that I thought, maybe weren't adequately served with allergy immunology services and thought, could I move here? Could I open a practice here? And it really felt very overwhelming. I think that's what a lot of people feel before they kind of take that leap of entrepreneurship as a physician. There's a lot of fear, there's a lot of unease. And for me, I think at that time, it just wasn't necessarily the right thing yet. Coming out of the military, I really wanted to kind of dive into civilian practice and figure out like how to even do that stuff, even just things like coding and billing, which of course we still have to code in the military, but we're not billing, we're not looking for reimbursement because it's just part of this military system. So I think that there is a very steep learning curve. So I ended up taking a job working in a multi-specialty group where I really, for a majority of the time I was there, was the only allergist immunologist. And as I spent 5.5 years in that practice, I really was able to pick apart, what do I like about the practice of medicine? How do I think the practice of medicine is best, performed? What's the best way to deliver care? What things did I not like about the practice that I was in? What were things that were common complaints that patients delivered? And how could you improve upon that experience? And as I really started to kind of, catalog those thoughts, at that time I decided, which was actually, it was right at the beginning of 2020 was when I had this kind of thought process was, I think it's time for me to step out on my own and practice medicine on my own terms and to deliver the care that our patients deserved. So that was the beginning of it.
So then between that time of, you thinking about it and having that thought, and then, you actually creating your practice or where you are now, what are some things that needed to happen, some mindset shifts that you needed to make?
There's a very steep learning curve. In fact, I just was talking with someone this morning and she had said to me, I've thought about, opening my practice, but how would I even learn this? And I said, well, I've had those same thoughts too. And there's so many things to learn. There are so many things that you just need to really kind of be very open-minded to the fact that there's a lot that we don't know. And, physicians are great learners. Physicians enjoy learning. And I'm someone who enjoys learning. So, in the time from when I decided, I'm going to start my own practice to the time that I actually started the practice probably was almost a year, a little less than a year in total. And so it allowed me time to kind of get my thoughts organized of what are all the things that I need to figure out. And then just bit by bit, I started, probably the first thing I did was really tapping into resources that I could find. Like every single allergist, immunologist who had their own practice that I knew, I called and I set up time and took notebooks of notes of, trying to just get questions answered and pick their brains and figure out like, knowing what they now know, what did they wish they knew or did differently at the beginning, things like that, questions to really try to help build the process. And at the time that I was getting started as well, I think I also tapped into some resources through social media. There are Facebook groups for physicians, and there's one for physicians in private practice that I had found, not specific to allergy and immunology, but really of all practices. And there's so much, volumes and volumes of information to sort through. I really just utilized, every question I had on my list. I went through the search bar and printed out, people's comments about things that I was trying to figure out. And so utilizing that kind of advice or, I was trying to pick apart, even though they weren't necessarily advising me, but I was taking that as advice. And then I kind of began to get organized and to start to, prioritize what needs to be done first. And so by the time I left my job, my employed practice, I was pretty close to being all the way set up to open, which I opened a couple of months later.
So definitely a learning curve. And I think you've seen that time. And then now you've definitely learned a lot of stuff. Like just hearing you going through the forms and, asking questions or taking answers from other people, even though they weren't directly advising you.
Sure.
That's really cool.
That's really like the nuts and bolts of practice. But the business of medicine is a whole nother layer, And I also I know nothing about that, right? And so to be an entrepreneur, to be in the business of medicine, to employ people, right? And like, I'm responsible for their livelihood, to really make sure I was 100% committed to doing the best that I could to make it work for them. That was another place that I tapped in to learning. And when I found Dr. Una, she had been in her practice already for 10 years at that time. And I said, well, there's no reason to learn this, through the School of Hard Knocks. Like, I'm going to just find people that know, right, the things that I need to learn and tap into that 100% and just say, look, tell me what works. Tell me what to do. I'm a great learner. I'm a good student. I will be doing all of the things that just paid off in dividends.
That's amazing. And my mom she does that a lot. Not does, like she says it a lot that like, when you're trying to learn something new, that you find someone who's already done it, who's an expert in that area, and you just go right underneath them and like, okay, tell me what I need to do so that I can get this done. But that's really amazing. And then so I know that you've scaled your practice to multiple seven figures, in less than 5 years. And this is a time where everyone believes that private practice is dead. So how are you able to scale your business like that in these times?
Josh, that's such a good question. My practice falls under the insurance model. And especially, I think right now, we're at a time of a lot of frustration, a lot of problems with declining reimbursements and, constantly submitting records and trying to, get paid for the work that we do. And I think in general right now, physicians in insurance-based practices are really feeling that struggle. But I think you have to be very creative with how you structure the practice. And part of that is, knowing your numbers inside and out and really knowing, like, with all of the overhead that you have, what do you need to do to be profitable? And so, in an insurance-based practice, as time marched on, we had so much volume of patients through consistent marketing and speaking and visibility in the community that, we've had this massive influx of patients who just, who want to be a part of the practice. They want to receive the best care that, they can get. Of course, that's what we deliver. And so as that volume went up and I learned, that it was truly more than what I could handle by myself, the idea of building team and allowing to really optimize that patient growth by adding additional providers to the team really made a difference, because not only were we then getting patients in sooner, we were getting them taken care of faster, we were getting their needs met in a more timely manner that worked for them, but then we were able to fill multiple schedules. And so, as we were providing more care, that adds to the, revenue collected for the practice and ultimately allows us to, put more into the way that we deliver care because the practice is profitable. And so by the time I was in maybe year 3 in my practice, we'd already outgrown my clinic space, which, when I signed my lease before I opened my practice, which I signed a 10-year lease, by the way, I thought, well, I don't know when I'll grow into this space. I had 5 exam rooms. I thought, who needs that many if you're just one person? But within 3 years, we were tossing elbows to see who can get patients in the rooms, and the waiting room was always full, and it overflowed into the hallway, which drove me crazy. I thought, oh my gosh, I can't believe I have a practice where people are in the hall. And I thought, we need to do something else. We need to allow for more physical growth, so that way the growth of our practice inside had space to grow and to breathe. So, we moved into a new office almost a year ago now, which is more than double the space of my original location, which now I have a wonderful startup internal medicine practice subleasing from me, which I'm so grateful for. And they're absolutely wonderful. But now that I have all of this space, right, now I have to look at each square foot of the office as a profit center of saying, how do we utilize this space in the most optimal way to continue to deliver care, but to make sure we're doing it in a profitable way, right? What's the point of having all this space? I'm paying all this more money per square foot for rent, and all of the things cost more, like the utilities and the internet service and the cleaning of the office. I mean, everything is more because it's bigger. So then profit needs to go up, and revenue certainly needs to go up to cover the overhead. So then you kind of need to start getting, more and more creative and looking for opportunities to do things differently, to think differently, to add services that maybe we weren't doing before, to enhance the care that we provide and truly make my practice, the center of excellence of allergy and clinical immunology in Northern Virginia that I truly believe that it is.
And I know you mentioned EBS a little bit earlier, Dr. Una specifically, and you've been there for how many years? 5?
Yep. So I started in EBS in September of 2020, and it has just been, pivotal in my business education. And I truly attribute the growth and success of my practice to the things that I've learned through EBS. And doctors don't learn this stuff, right? Unless you are, have a dual degree with an MBA, medical school does not provide us training in this. Many people are just not in any way business savvy. They don't know how to read a profit and loss statement. They don't know how to look at a balance sheet and, things like that. Like, we don't know this stuff. And so to me, unless I was going to really learn it, I wasn't going to be able to really do it, And so EBS has just been the most, pivotal opportunity for learning, but also for community and surrounding myself with other people who are doing this, whether it's in private practice, whether it's an insurance-based practice like mine, or doing something totally different. There's so much learning and education to get just from being in the presence of people who are doing the work. So it's just been, I can't say more great things about my time in EBS.
So could you expand a little bit on that? Because I know people like to say, well, who have been inside of the business school, they say that EBS is like an alternate reality, right? So could you
Sure.
help someone like understand what it's like to be inside of EBS?
It is like an alternate reality. I haven't heard that, but it really is a good truth in that there's a few different aspects of what we do in EBS. So the first I would say is the coaching sessions, the weekly coaching sessions. They're done in a group call setting. There is so much opportunity for individual learning, individual coaching, but also learning from other people's experiences, doing breakouts into small groups, really being presented with ideas of how to become visible, how to become a household name in your community, all of the things that are truly like so essential in building something really special. So, just the time and coaching, I think, of the weekly calls is fantastic. Beyond that, we have a private Facebook group, and in the Facebook group, there's a lot of engagement. There's a lot of people who may ask for ideas or ask for feedback, or who share their wins and who share their experiences. And, and I think engaging in that setting has been really just helpful to kind of be in that same space with people who are just doing really outstanding things. And then the last piece of EBS that I think might be even one of my favorites is the opportunity to get together in person, which we do twice a year through the vision retreat in October and the business makeover mastermind in the springtime. And I think even just the experience of, starting to do vision planning in the fall for the next calendar year. I mean, that in itself is like such a brilliant concept that had not really been on my radar. I was not somebody who made vision boards. I thought that was like a foo-foo thing that was, creative. Like you could get on Canva and like have an arts and crafts session of let's make a vision board. But I didn't see the practicality of it until I really started digging into how do we create vision and how do we take that vision into, the movement that we need to start acting upon our goals and then the momentum going forward that, usually I would say by springtime, I'm okay, like what's next? I did the things, and then it just pushes you to act and to do because, otherwise time just ticks on. And if I keep the mentality of a physician working in my practice and don't really step back and take the time to work on my practice, that growth doesn't happen. Tomorrow is the same as today, which is the same as yesterday, and that growth, that mindset growth doesn't happen. So I think those different aspects of EBS really draw those things out of you, and it allows you to take advantage of the time that we have. Time is a gift, right? It is not guaranteed. And so, really making every moment count, not only providing, I'm also a physician in the practice, right? So not only providing that excellent care, but being able to provide the excellent care as well to the practice. So the practice continues to grow and evolve. That's one of my favorite parts of being in that EBS community is learning those things.
And so I just want to reach out to, everybody who's watching, who's listening to the podcast. And I want to invite you to book a call because what we know is that EBS is alternate reality. Now, there's more than just EBS. There's also PPPM, so it's the Profitable Private Practice Movement. And so Dr. Una has something for everybody, okay? Whether it's the business school, whether it's PPPM, whether it's the books or the podcast. So I want to invite you to book a call and you will be, connected to one of the members of the team and we can figure out what is best for you, moving forward. So you can go to EntreMD.com/success to book a call today. That's EntreMD.com/success. And then so Dr. Kaufman, how has owning a private practice affected your life, your personal life?
When I was employed, the office where I worked was at a little bit of a distance from where I lived, especially it was probably, 30 minutes away. I had to get on the DC Beltway, which notoriously is, terrible traffic. And I really did not experience flexibility in scheduling. I remember there were times where, the school would call and say, your kid is sick, you need to come pick them up. And I was like, I can be there in 2.5 hours, I just couldn't. I didn't have that ability to just be there or to be present. When I opened my own practice, of course, the biggest dream is to open a practice in the community where you live and serve your community locally. So now my practice is, less than a 10-minute drive from my home. I have the ability to design the schedule that works for me. I can take my children to school in the morning. I can get to their 3:30 soccer games. I can do the things that are important to them, to my family, to be present, to show them that they are my most important priority. And to have that flexibility is amazing. I still see clinic 5 days a week. I have non-clinical time where I do my business activities. And when I have personal commitments, everything else just works around that. And I make that work, which is so wonderful. Beyond that, I think, in addition to being a servant of my community, I am extremely grateful to be able to provide a livelihood for my amazing team who work with me, and we even have members of our team who are not directly in our office, who are our extended team, who work from home at nighttime overseas while we're working during the day. And some of my team members in that regard have been able to use the money that they earn from working for my practice to put siblings through school. I mean, it's truly amazing. And just the gift of being able to provide has been extremely rewarding. But then, of course, beyond that, I think with my own children, I think being a role model to them and showing them, you don't have to fit into a little, box and say, well, this is the job that I'm going to have when I grow up. And that's what that looks like. The fact that I can show them, you can truly do whatever you want, right? If you have a goal, if you have a dream, if you can find a need that needs to be met and come up with a solution, you can do that. And I think it's really just wonderful to show them that's what I do. I think those are just some of the ways that being a private practice owner has enriched my life privately.
And then, so if you could teach a private practice owner, who's struggling, if you could teach them one thing, what would it be?
The first one is you have to market yourself. You have to market yourself. I think, gone are the days of hanging a shingle and crossing your fingers and hoping that patients will show up. They will not. They will find somebody else who is being loud and showing themselves to the community. So you do have to engage in marketing. It is an essential part of the practice. There are so many ways to do that. And most of them don't include spending a lot of money on marketing. Like, it's truly not necessary to do that. But to learn to market yourself in your practice is essential. So that's, I think, the first most important thing. Beyond that, I would say the importance of developing team. And the reason I say that is that when I started my practice as a solo physician, as a solo practice owner, we had a very small practice. It was myself and a few medical assistants. And I know, and I talk to physicians a lot who think, I'm going to have this micro practice and it's going to be me and I'm going to do all the things. And that is like such a cool feeling at the beginning. But the problem is when the entire practice revolves around you, then you are tied to every aspect of what your practice does. And so it really almost becomes, to some degree, a limitation. And so learning how to grow and develop team has been the best gift, because there are things that, that I used to do that I don't need to do them. I'm not the best person to do them, and they can be delegated to someone else. So that way I can get in my zone of genius. I can do the things that enrich my life and allow me to, give my best to my practice. But in growing team, we are serving our community better, but it also gives me that opportunity and time freedom to be able to, to practice medicine on my terms.
That's good. And so I have a follow-up question for that, because you just mentioned team, and I just whatever light bulb was over there just dinged the moment you said that if you're, in every single part of your practice, then it's kind of a limitation. So how have you been able to overcome that, wanting to have yourself in every single part? Because, at the beginning, that's how it can be. I feel important because I need to be here and then here. But then, like you said, it can become a limitation. So how are you able to overcome that?
I think the biggest way is to surround yourself by people who see your vision. And when I build team, I'm really very intentional about curating the correct combination of personalities, the right people to be a part of my practice, because these are people who can understand my vision, who see my vision, who are coachable, who are teachable, and who then themselves become an extension of me, right? So the biggest and scariest thing about delegation is the loss of control, right? Of course, I think those of us who are entrepreneurs, we like to have our hands in all the things, right? But when you curate that team, that is kind of the best way to extend your ability to deliver the services that you are good at by downloading them into somebody else, by giving them that opportunity. And they can be the experts of those things. And so I think just knowing that the practice is more than me. I am not synonymous with the practice, right? The practice is the practice, and I'm me, And so I think just having that mindset that separates yourself, and then it's almost like thinking like a director of a show, right? Like, if the director of the show did all of the things, the show wouldn't be directed because their director would be too busy doing all the things. And so that's kind of how I feel about it. But it's really that choice of who are the people who are going to be able to deliver the services that I need, or the messages that I need, or the things that make us such an amazing place to receive care and to work is the most important part. So I think just really not just choosing someone because they showed up, choosing somebody because they're the right person. That really makes a difference.
That's good. That's amazing. Thank you so much for, answering my on a whim question.
That's
And
okay.
then, so another thing is, where can people find you? They want to get in contact with you, or maybe they live around the area that you live in and they want to get to know more about you. How can they do that?
So my practice is located in Vienna, Virginia. We're in the Tysons region, which is just outside of the DC Beltway. So we're in the Washington, DC metro area, and we truly serve patients from all over the place. People truly come to us from far and wide. So in our office, we are happy to serve. Our patients can find us through our practice website, which is kaufmanallergy.com. And there is a link where patients can request a new patient appointment. And that is truly the best way to initially reach out. So that way our scheduling team can connect with our future patients and provide them the best and fastest response and service. On social media, the best place to find me is on Instagram. And my Instagram is dr.kaufmanallergy. And I love connecting with other physicians and other allied health professionals in the community. I love connecting with people. And that's just a wonderful place to kind of see what we're doing, and that we kind of like to hallmark some of the amazing things about, the practice and what I'm doing and all of that stuff. So that's where I can be found on social media. And we are also looking to hire another full-time physician next year. So if you're watching this and you're an allergist immunologist and looking for the most amazing team to join or a wonderful job opportunity, you can please reach out to me directly, and that can be by email at administrator@kaufmanallergy.com.
To everybody who is watching, I'd like to say this, that do not allow this podcast to be your best kept secret. Please share this with a doctor that you know, a private practice physician that you know, that you believe that this podcast will truly benefit. We have a lot of doctors who also believe that private practice is dead, which it's not. The old playbook may be dead, but private practice itself is not dead. And this podcast is here to show everybody just that, because we have people in private practice who are thriving and who have their dream business and their dream life at the same time. So if you know a private practice physician or any physician in general that you believe this podcast will benefit, please share this with them. And thank you so much, Dr. Karen, for allowing me to interview you. This has truly been amazing. And I do hope to have you on this podcast again, literally just to talk about team, because that one statement you made really piqued my interest.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it, and I'll definitely come back.
Yes, thank you so much. And to everyone who's watching, we'll see you next time.